Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are going really deep inside.
Yeah.
Not just into your habits, but into the fundamental non-negotiable biology that dictates when and how and, for how long you actually sleep.
Mm.
If you've ever felt kind of trapped by a broken sleep cycle, or maybe worse, if you spent your whole life chasing some mythical 8-hour standard,
Right.
um, this deep dive is going to fundamentally rewire how you think about rest. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
We're pulling exclusively from the bedrock science, the core educational material that's used in specialized cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, or CBTI.
That's the standard, yeah.
This is the hard science that helps people truly reset their relationship with sleep. We're not just summarizing it, we're using it to challenge some old, maybe seemingly logical, but actually counterproductive beliefs, especially that really ingrained myth of sleep recovery.
That's exactly right. Our mission today really is to replace that anxiety, that sort of pervasive guesswork about lost sleep,
Yeah, the worrying.
with firm technical biological knowledge. Because for a lot of people, the very attempt to fix their sleep, that's what's stopping them from getting it.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to dismantle those previous notions, those beliefs that might be hindering progress.
Yeah.
We're starting today with two really crucial, often misunderstood forces.
Mm-hmm.
The homeostatic drive for sleep, how much pressure builds up,
Right.
and the circadian clock, which sets the timing. Understanding how those two interplay, well, that's key to breaking the cycle of poor sleep.
And we absolutely have to move past this idea that there's some universal sleep requirement we're all supposed to meet.
Yeah.
And maybe the most anxiety-reducing fact right out of the gate is that sleep needs vary, dramatically. So let's start right there with that crucial, kind of surprising piece of information. For decades, 8 hours has been the cultural default.
The magic number.
Yeah, the universal minimum standard, supposedly. And, okay, yes, the general recommendation for most normal adults, it does sit in a window between, say, 6 to 8 hours per night.
That's the average, sure.
But the emphasis has to be on the word average. Because averages, well, they're inherently pretty poor guides for individual health, right? And when it comes to sleep, they can actually generate stress.
That anxiety is precisely the problem we're trying to tackle. Think about it. When people who biologically only need, say, 6 hours try to force 8, they end up spending 2 extra hours just lying in bed awake.
Right.
And what happens? They start associating their bed with frustration, not rest.
Right. It becomes a stressful place.
Exactly. The variance in human biology, it just absolutely defies that standard average. And this is where the source material, the CBTI stuff, it immediately forces you to stop looking outward at, generalized advice.
Yeah, stop Googling how much sleep do I need.
Right, and start actually examining your own unique requirements.
Okay.
We really need to acknowledge the stunning scope of this individual variance. I mean, we are talking about people who genuinely, biologically, need only 3 to 4 hours of sleep each night.
3 or 4. Right.
Really, these individuals, they're often called short sleepers. And crucially, they're not suffering from sleep deprivation. They're just, genetically wired to be functionally well-rested on that small amount.
Wow.
Their brain chemistry, their metabolism, it just processes the need for sleep differently.
Okay, so that's one end of the spectrum. What about the other?
And then conversely, you have the long sleepers. Now, these are individuals who require as much as 10 to 12 hours of consistent nightly sleep.
10 to 12 every night.
Just to function optimally,
Yeah.
to maintain concentration, manage their mood. If a long sleeper tries to cram themselves into, say, a standard 8-hour corporate schedule,
Oh, man.
they are fighting a biological war every single day.
That's a huge range. 3 hours to 12 hours, that's a 9-hour difference.
It's a vast difference. And importantly, this difference isn't about willpower or discipline. You can't just train yourself to need less sleep if you're a long sleeper. It often boils down to genetic predisposition, how quickly your body accumulates and then clears the substances that drive that sleep pressure we mentioned.
Okay.
So if you're one of those individuals who, consistently feels great on 5 hours, the stress you inflict on yourself trying to force yourself to get 8 hours, that's purely psychological. It's driven by inaccurate cultural expectations.
So if the source material is right, the absolute foundational step in fixing sleep habits isn't about, timing your bedtime perfectly.
Not initially, no.
but first figuring out what the target actually is for you.
Absolutely. That is the critical context we really want you, the listener, to grasp. Before you start implementing any structured corrective steps like sleep restriction or anything like that, you absolutely must identify how much sleep you actually require. If those old ideas about needing 7 or 8 hours are just fueling anxiety and leading to more time spent tossing and turning,
Yeah.
then those previous notions are actively holding you back. You really have to discard the idea that one specific duration fits everyone and start respecting your own biological signature.
Yeah.
Just doing that initial step alone, can dramatically reduce that performance anxiety that builds up around sleep.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so we know the quantity varies. What about the timing?
Right. So once we understand the individual need, the quantity, we then have to address the universal timing mechanism that regulates when that quantity is likely to occur. And that's the internal clocks, or more accurately, the circadian clock.
The body clock.
Exactly. This is the foundation upon which, well, pretty much all our sleep biology rests.
Okay.
Every single human, actually most animals too, possess this incredibly finely tuned biological timekeeper. And it works in a roughly 24-hour period.
Roughly 24 hours. Not exactly.
Well, inherently it's often slightly longer, but it gets synced up. This whole rhythm is governed by a tiny bundle of cells deep in the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN.
SEN. Got it.
People often call it the body's master pacemaker. And this pacemaker, it isn't just passively tracking the external day, it's actively producing these 24-hour cycles in nearly every essential bodily function you can think of.
So it's like the conductor of the whole physiological orchestra.
That's a great analogy, yeah. It regulates cellular activity, it influences digestion, it controls the release of key hormones like cortisol and melatonin,
Uh-huh.
and most visibly for us, it governs the precise timing of the sleep-wake pattern. When you feel alert, when you start to feel drowsy, that's largely the SCN at work.
And what's really amazing is just how deep this mechanism runs, right? And how little it seems to rely on the outside world, at least initially, to get its rhythm going.
Exactly.
Like if you were starting a new job in some windowless basement office or, the classic example from the sleep studies.
Cave studies.
Yeah. If a person were put in a carefully controlled environment, like a deep cave, completely cut off from all external clocks, daylight, any social cues, what I call the exogenous
Like
inputs,
time givers, yeah.
you'd find they would still show a consistent, complete sleep-wake cycle. It keeps running.
That right there demonstrates the endogenous nature of the clock. It's self-sustaining, it generates its own rhythm from within. Now, interestingly, without those external light or social cues to anchor it, the human rhythm tends to actually drift a bit longer than 24 hours, maybe 24 hours and 15 minutes, give or take.
Oh, okay. So it's not perfectly 24 hours on its own.
Not usually, no. That's called the free running period.
Hmm.
But the rhythm itself, that cycle, remains really solid. The reason we typically stick precisely to 24 hours in the real world is because the external environment, especially the rising sun, but also our social schedules, mealtimes acts as a synchronizer. A Zeitgeber is the technical term.
Time giver.
Exactly. It pulls that slightly longer internal rhythm back into alignment with the exact 24-hour day, every day.
So the outside world sounds like this necessary correctional force, constantly kind of nudging our slightly lazy internal clock back onto the 24-hour track.
Precisely. And that's why consistency is so important. If that correctional force is inconsistent, if our schedules shift wildly day to day, if we sleep in super late on weekends, or if we rely too heavily on bright artificial light late at night, we weaken that crucial link between our internal rhythm and the external world. We send mixed signals to the SCN. But the core lesson here is that this body clock is constantly running in the background, and it dictates the optimal timing for your body's readiness to sleep and, just as importantly, to wake up feeling refreshed.
Okay, so we have this internal clock running. How do we know what time it thinks it is? How can we measure that?
That's the perfect question. Because we can't just, plug a USB into the SCN and read its mind.
Right.
We have to rely on a measurable physiological output, something the clock controls that we can track. And one of the most reliable and well-studied markers is the circadian temperature rhythm.
Body temperature.
Core body temperature, yeah. If the circadian system, the SCN, is the master conductor we talked about, then the daily temperature cycle is probably the easiest, most reliable way for us to read its sheet music, to see what it's planning.
Okay, so how does that work? Does it just go up and down randomly?
Not at all. When we monitor core body temperature across a full 24 hours, we see a highly consistent, very predictable up and down pattern. And this pattern isn't just some random side effect. It's intrinsically linked to the biological mechanisms that actively prepare the body for sleep and wakefulness.
Okay, so let's nail down the critical time points in that cycle because these aren't arbitrary, right? They reflect real physiological shifts happening inside us.
Exactly. Let's start with the lowest point, the bottom of the cycle, sometimes called the nadir. Core body temperature hits its absolute lowest point around 3 or 4 a.m. for most people on a conventional schedule.
3 or 4 a.m. So like deep in the middle of the night, usually towards the end of the main sleep period.
Typically, yes. And physiologically, this temperature drop doesn't just happen passively. The body is actively promoting heat loss to get there, primarily through something called peripheral vasodilation.
Okay, what's that?
It just means blood flow increases to the skin, especially to your hands and feet. Your body opens up those vessels to radiate heat out into the surrounding environment, effectively cooling your core.
Okay, so the body's literally dumping heat. That makes total sense why, we all feel like we sleep better in a cool room.
Exactly. You're helping facilitate what your body is already trying to do. It's not just a preference, it's tapping into a biological process.
So it's not just comfort, it's biology. Okay, so that's the low point, 3, 4 a.m. What happens then?
Okay, so from that 3 or 4 a.m. low point, the temperature will then rise steadily through the morning. This rise acts like a biological wake-up signal, promoting increasing alertness and energy as you head towards the day.
The body's warming up for action.
Pretty much. It will then continue rising and eventually hit its peak, meaning maximum core heat and usually maximal alertness and cognitive performance, somewhere around 3 or 4 p.m. in the late afternoon.
Wait, 3 or 4 p.m.? Isn't that when a lot of people feel that afternoon slump?
It often coincides with that feeling, yeah, but physiologically speaking, this is actually the point of peak internal temperature, and for many types of tasks, peak performance capability. The slump might be related to other factors, like lunch digestion or time awake.
Interesting. Okay, so peak temperature mid-afternoon. Then what?
Then, after that late afternoon peak, the temperature begins its gradual but steady fall again through the evening hours. And this fall, this controlled cool-down phase, that's the critical time leading up to your biological bedtime.
Here's where it gets really interesting. So that downward slope in temperature, that's the signal.
That's the key signal. The rhythm itself reflects the working of the body clock, the SCN, and it provides probably the single best predictor of when sleep is most likely to occur naturally within that 24-hour day. The body clock uses that temperature decrease to help cue the timing of melatonin release from the pineal gland and the overall onset of sleepiness.
Melatonin follows the temperature drop.
It's closely linked, yeah. The drop facilitates melatonin's effects.
So thinking about our own evening behaviors, we often try to trigger this cool down ourselves, right? Like taking a warm bath or shower before bed. That always seems a bit counterintuitive, warming up to cool down.
But it works because of the after effect. The warm water brings blood to the surface of the skin, vasodilation again, and then when you get out of the bath or shower, the rapid evaporation and cooling of your skin enhances that necessary core body temperature drop.
So you're kind of jump-starting the cool down process.
Exactly. You're accelerating the signal that biological readiness for sleep has arrived. The drop is the signal. If you try to force yourself to sleep before that temperature drop has really begun in earnest.
When you're still near your peak temperature.
Right. Your body is still physiologically in its peak alert phase, which is why people often lie awake feeling frustrated if they go to bed too early for their internal clock. The temperature cycle doesn't directly control sleep itself, but it's the most easily measurable manifestation of the internal clock that does regulate it. Think of it like the thermometer for your body's readiness to rest.
Okay, so this temperature rhythm is crucial for timing. What happens when that timing gets thrown off?
Right. So in our normal daily lives, ideally, we're constantly trying to keep our external schedule, our work times, meals, light exposure, the exogenous cues perfectly aligned with our internal temperature rhythm, our endogenous clock.
Keeping them in sync.
Yeah. But when those two forces clash, when they get out of sync, that's when interference occurs. And honestly, this mechanism is behind almost all timing-related sleep disorders, like delayed sleep phase or advanced sleep phase. And the most famous example,
Jet lag.
jet lag. It's the classic illustration of this painful misalignment, and it perfectly demonstrates the sheer power of that internal clock we've been discussing. Let's take the scenario from the CBTI source material. Imagine a man living in New York who flies to Los Angeles. That's a 3-hour time zone change westward.
Okay, 3 hours earlier in LA.
Right. Now, the New Yorker's body clock, governed by his SCN and that temperature rhythm we just mapped out, is still stubbornly operating on Eastern time when he lands.
It hasn't caught up yet.
Not even close. He is effectively lagged behind the real-world clock time in California. His internal system is essentially stuck 3 hours too fast for the new environment he's in.
Okay, so his body thinks it's later than it actually is in LA. What does that feel like?
Well, the consequences are pretty immediate and, yeah, usually pretty rough. Let's say this New Yorker's normal biological bedtime back east was 10 p.m. ET. His body, driven by that falling temperature curve, will start strongly signaling the need for sleep at what is now 7 p.m. Pacific time in LA.
Wow, 7 p.m., that's early.
Way earlier than he probably wants to go to sleep on his first night there. So he's likely to become overwhelmingly sleepy 3 hours earlier than he wishes. And it works the other way in the morning, too.
How so?
His temperature nadir, that 3 or 4 a.m. low point back in New York,
Right.
will now hit around midnight or 1 a.m. LA time. His natural wake-up signal, that temperature rise,
Yeah.
will start kicking in around maybe 3 a.m. LA time.
Meaning he wakes up super early?
Meaning he wakes up 3 hours earlier than he prefers, feeling like it's time to start the day when it's still the middle of the night in California.
Dinner of the day.
He experiences profound daytime fatigue, difficulty concentrating, maybe irritability, because his internal clock is demanding sleep at times when he's attempting to, navigate a business meeting or drive on the freeway. It's this mismatch, this conflict, where the body's physiological demands are completely out of step with the social and environmental expectations that causes the significant impairment we call jet lag.
That mismatch is the core conflict then. If you look at those diagrams, like the figure 2.2 in the source about jet lag effects,
Yeah, those are helpful.
you can literally see it. The individual's circadian temperature rhythm, which dictates their biological bedtime, is sitting there, shifted 3 hours ahead of the desired sleep-wake schedule in the new California time zone. The conflict is visually stark. The body is screaming bedtime, but the sun might still be up and everyone else is still active.
Exactly.
And the cost here is more than just feeling groggy or inconvenient. This significant change in the timing of the sleep period, it fundamentally interferes with the ability to sleep normally, even if the person is utterly exhausted from the travel. That's a key point. Exhaustion doesn't automatically override the clock's timing signal.
So their body tries to sleep, but it's at the wrong biological time, resulting in fragmented, shallow, insufficient rest.
Precisely. They might fall asleep early out of sheer exhaustion, but then wake up wide awake at 3 a.m. because their clock says, morning. It's poor quality sleep.
Okay, so how does the body fix this? How does it get back in sync?
Well, this leads directly to the solution, which actually underscores the power of those external cues, the zeitgebers we mentioned. The only way the internal clock eventually resets is through repeated, consistent exposure to the strong time cues in the new environment, primarily the light-dark cycle.
Light is the key synchronizer.
Especially morning light. Getting bright light exposure shortly after waking up in the new time zone is the most powerful signal to the SCN, telling it to shift its timing earlier, in the case of westward travel, or later for eastward travel. That external light input, acting directly on the SCN via the eyes, gradually allows the body clock to reset, phase shifting day by day, until it gets back in sync with the LA time zone. It's a slow, methodical process called re-entrainment.
So it takes time. It doesn't just snap back.
No, the general rule of thumb is about 1 hour of time zone shift per day of adjustment, though it varies. But the deeper implication here, for you listening, is this. If traveling just 3 time zones can cause this level of internal chaos, think about what inconsistent daily behavior does. Things like sleeping in really late on the weekends, social jet lag, or having wildly shifting work schedules, or inconsistent light exposure. You can essentially induce a self-inflicted, chronic, low-grade jet lag without ever leaving home.
Wow, so you're constantly forcing your internal rhythm to fight against your external schedule.
Yes. And that makes achieving deep, consolidated sleep nearly impossible over the long run. Consistency becomes paramount.
Okay, so the clock is powerful, it dictates timing, and consistency helps keep it aligned. Does the clock itself, or how it functions, change over our lifespan? Does this powerful, seemingly reliable rhythm stay exactly the same from when we're, say, 25 into our 60s or 70s?
That's a really important question, and the clear answer from the research is absolutely not. Getting older results in highly predictable structural changes in sleep patterns and sleep architecture. And understanding these normal age-related changes is absolutely vital for managing our expectations and, again, avoiding unnecessary frustration and anxiety about sleep.
Okay, so what kind of changes are we talking about? When do they start?
We typically see these changes becoming more evident starting in middle age, maybe 40s or 50s, and they often accelerate somewhat into the senior years, say 65 plus. The crucial point isn't just that sleep duration might change slightly, but that the fundamental architecture of sleep, the structure of the sleep stages across the night, shifts quite dramatically. And this happens even if the person feels they are trying just as hard to sleep well as they did when they were younger.
The underlying machinery is changing.
Exactly. So let's detail some of the specific physiological shifts that the source material highlights. First, and perhaps most noticeably for many people, we observe that older adults tend to spend more time awake in bed.
More time awake during the night?
Yes. This means both an increase in the number of times they awaken during the night and often a longer duration of wakefulness after they initially fall asleep. That's technically called WASO, wake after sleep onset.
Also.
So they might go to bed earlier, hoping to get more sleep, but the total time they spend actually asleep, what we call their sleep efficiency, time asleep divided by time in bed, is often reduced.
So that sounds like the sleep is becoming more fragmented. It's breaking up more.
Precisely. The sleep becomes less consolidated, less continuous. That's the first major change, increased fragmentation. The second major change is that people, as they age, spend significantly less time in the deepest parts of sleep.
The really restorative stage.
Yes, what's technically known as slow-wave sleep, or stage N3 sleep. It's characterized by those large, slow delta waves on an EEG. This is the stage thought to be most physically and metabolically restorative.
Yeah.
And as we get older, the total duration we spend in this deep delta sleep decreases quite significantly.
Okay, so more waking up, less deep sleep.
The net result of those two main changes, increased awakenings and reduced deep sleep, is that sleep often becomes perceptibly shallower and more broken. People in their 60s and 70s commonly report that they are much more conscious of waking up several times during the night, maybe to use the restroom or just briefly, and they often don't feel that same sense of powerful, deep, uninterrupted rest they remember enjoying when they were younger.
They feel like they're light sleepers now.
That's a common description, yeah. Now, this is where we absolutely need to introduce the important caveat, which directly addresses the anxiety that often accompanies these perceived changes.
Okay, what's the caveat?
While these age-related shifts, the increased fragmentation, the reduced deep sleep, certainly create a biological backdrop that makes it easier for sleep problems like insomnia to develop.
Yeah.
They absolutely do not guarantee that someone will develop full-blown chronic insomnia.
So these changes happen, but they don't automatically equal a sleep disorder.
Correct. Many older adults successfully adapt their routines and maintain perfectly good sleep hygiene, despite these underlying biological shifts. They might adjust their total time in bed, for instance, to better match their slightly declining sleep need or efficiency. They adapt.
They work with the changes, not against them.
Exactly. However, the source material does offer a necessary dose of realism here. It is probably unrealistic for most people to expect to return to the exact type of deep, consolidated, maybe 8+ hours sleep they enjoyed consistently in their younger years, say in their 20s or 30s.
So if you're 65 and you're constantly beating yourself up because you can't sleep like you did when you were 25.
You're setting yourself up for failure, basically,
Yeah.
which then leads directly to that frustration and anxiety loop we keep talking about.
Right. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Managing expectations based on biological reality is so key here. The individual who transitions more gracefully through these aging-related sleep changes is often the one who understands that while their sleep might naturally be a bit shallower or shorter now, it can still be perfectly sufficient for their health and daytime function if they avoid adopting those detrimental habits that weaken their sleep drive or disrupt their circadian rhythm.
Which brings us perfectly to the next section. The things people do when they feel their sleep isn't good enough.
Yeah, this really gets to the core of the behavioral side of things, and maybe, like you said, the most counterintuitive finding in all this sleep science we're digging into. When people lose sleep or perceive they've lost sleep, their natural instinct, which seems totally logical, is to try and compensate somehow, to make it up. Right, I need to catch up.
Exactly. But the paradox is, they often try to make up for it by taking actions that are fundamentally the opposite of what actually needs to be done to help regulate their clock and, crucially, increase their natural sleep pressure for the next night.
This is it. This is the vicious behavioral loop that so often perpetuates chronic insomnia. People operate from this premise of sleep debt. This flawed idea that every single minute of lost sleep is like a financial debt that absolutely must be repaid minute for minute.
Yeah, you hear that term all the time, sleep debt.
And the fear generated by that concept leads them to adopt to behaviors that actively undermine the two biological systems we just discussed, the circadian clock and a homeostatic sleep drive. We really need to categorize these common counterproductive habits clearly because they represent probably the highest behavioral risk factors for turning a night or two of bad sleep into a chronic problem.
Okay, what are the big ones?
All right, number one, taking daytime naps,
Yeah.
especially long ones or naps late in the day. Even short naps can dissipate that crucial sleep pressure.
Okay, napping is out.
Generally, for people with insomnia, yes. Number two, going to bed too early in the evening. Trying to force sleep before your biological clock, signaled by that temperature drop, is ready.
Lying in bed, hoping sleep will come.
Exactly, which often just leads to more time spent awake and frustrated in the bed.
Yeah.
And number three, attempting to recover lost sleep by sleeping in significantly later than usual following a poor night's sleep.
The weekend lie-in after a tough week.
Or even just hitting snooze multiple times on a Tuesday after a bad Monday night. These three seemingly sensible attempts, nap, go to bed early, sleep in later, they all effectively reduce the homeostatic sleep drive that you desperately need to be high for the following night, thus perpetuating the cycle of poor sleep.
Okay, let's dive into that mechanism more, the sleep pressure, the homeostatic drive, to really understand why those habits backfire so badly. Because this isn't just like behavioral advice, right? This is hard biological science.
Absolutely. The homeostatic sleep drive, sometimes called process S, in the two-process model of sleep regulation.
Process S for sleep drive.
Exactly. It basically dictates the intensity of our need for sleep at any given moment. And the longer we are continuously awake, the stronger this drive becomes. This is largely due to the gradual accumulation of certain sleep-promoting substances, like adenosine in the brain.
So adenosine builds up the longer you're awake.
That's one of the main players, yes. Think of process S as a biological pressure cooker or a timer that just steadily builds up pressure. The longer the lid stays on, the longer you're awake.
Okay, build-in pressure.
The source material illustrates this perfectly with a simple comparison. A person is much, much more likely to sleep for a long, deep, consolidated period after being awake for, say, 16 hours in a row, when that sleep pressure is maximized, than they are after being awake for only, say, 2 hours, like right after a nap.
Makes sense. More time awake equals more pressure built up.
Precisely. And this biological mechanism dictates that if you want strong, consolidated sleep tonight, you must remain awake throughout the day and actively avoid those pressure-releasing activities like napping or sleeping in too late in order to build up enough sleep drive, enough pressure to produce a full, solid night's sleep later.
So when you take that tempting 45-minute nap at 3 p.m. because you slept badly last night, or when you sleep until 11 a.m. on Saturday to catch up from the week, you're essentially opening the valve on that pressure cooker.
You're bleeding off that carefully accumulated sleep pressure.
Yeah.
You might feel a bit better temporarily from the nap or the lie-in,
Yeah, short-term relief.
but you have effectively robbed the subsequent night's sleep of the essential intensity, the drive. It needs to be deep and restorative. You've sabotaged the next night's potential.
Wow. Okay. That is a powerful insight.
It really is. And it leads to this crucial point. The body actually has a remarkable built-in ability to manage and compensate for sleep loss, but only if we allow the homeostatic drive to build naturally. People obviously experience profound sleepiness after a night of total sleep deprivation, for example.
Right. You feel terrible.
You do.
Uh-huh.
But the important reassurance from the science is that the body's system is inherently designed to compensate organically for that loss, without you needing to actively manage the recovery.
What does that organic compensation look like?
Well, firstly, even after a night of no sleep, most people typically can continue most of their normal daytime activities, albeit with significant difficulty and reduced performance. But critically, when they're finally allowed to sleep after that extended period of wakefulness.
And your pressure's super high.
Exactly. They tend to sleep longer than usual, yes, but most importantly, they sleep deeper. The proportion of that deep, slow-wave sleep, stage N3, dramatically increases in that recovery sleep.
Ah, so the body prioritizes the quality of sleep during recovery.
Precisely. It doesn't necessarily recover every single minute of total sleep time lost. That's the fallacy of the simple sleep debt calculation. You don't need to repay 8 hours if you missed 8 hours. But the body does typically recover the vast majority of the essential deep sleep, slow-wave sleep, that was missed, because that's biologically the most critical stage.
So the body is smart. It prioritizes fixing the most critical restorative components first, without necessarily needing to just add back all those hours you missed logged on the clock.
Exactly right. The body is incredibly efficient in this regard. It catches up on that vital slow-wave sleep very quickly and effectively, but only when the sleep pressure is sufficiently high to drive it.
Which means all that anxiety people feel about having like 10 hours of sleep debt accumulated by Friday.
It's largely unfounded biologically, and worse, it's counterproductive because it drives those maladaptive behaviors.
Yeah.
So the key takeaway here, the real big takeaway for anyone listening who struggles with sleep, has to be this. Try, as much as possible, not to worry a great deal about sleep you've already lost. And specifically, do not try to actively recover lost sleep. Because that worry itself, coupled with the attempts to compensate the naps, the early bedtimes, the sleeping in will only serve to worsen the existing sleep problem. How? By disrupting that crucial circadian synchronization we talked about, and by dramatically reducing the sleep pressure needed for the next night.
You have to trust the body's own recovery system.
You have to trust your biology. You have to step back, maintain a consistent schedule, allow that natural sleep pressure to build across the day, and let the biology of exhaustion work in your favor for the following night.
Stop fighting it, essentially. Hashtag tagged out outro. Wow. Okay, this deep dive has really fundamentally recalibrated how we should think about sleep. We've established that individual sleep requirements, they range massively from maybe 3 or 4 hours up to 10 or 12, completely debunking that restrictive 8-hour mandate that stresses so many people out.
Huge variance, yeah.
We've explored the incredibly powerful regulatory mechanisms of the internal body clock, the circadian rhythm, highlighted by that circadian temperature rhythm, which shows its lowest point around 3 or 4 a.m. and acts as a perfect marker for our internal biological time.
The body's thermometer for sleep readiness.
Exactly. We saw the immediate chaos that gets caused when that clock timing is misaligned with the environment, using the classic example of jet lag. And we've had to accept the biological reality that sleep naturally tends to become shallower and more fragmented as we age, a change that really requires acceptance and maybe some behavioral adaptation, not increased anxiety.
Managing expectations is key there.
But maybe most importantly, the biggest paradox we uncovered, that trying to fix lost sleep, trying to catch up, is often the #1 mechanism for making sleep worse in the long run. Because those seemingly logical attempts, like napping and sleeping in, they actually destroy the crucial homeostatic sleep pressure needed for deep, consolidated rest the next night.
That's the core behavioral trap, absolutely. So what does this all really mean for you, the listener? It means fundamentally shifting your focus. Stop tallying up lost hours from the past. That's just a psychological trap that fuels anxiety.
Right, let go of the dead idea.
Exactly. And instead, focus rigorously on building consistency in your schedule and maximizing your natural sleep drive going forward. Understanding this interplay between your 24-hour clock, process C, and your accumulating sleep pressure, process S, helps you manage expectations realistically and helps you avoid those anxiety-driven habits that only weaken your sleep system over time.
It sounds like you almost have to stop doing the things that are preventing your body from doing its job naturally.
That's a perfect way to put it, indeed.
Yeah.
So if worrying about lost sleep and actively trying to recover it only makes the problem worse by disrupting your rhythm and reducing your sleep pressure, we want to leave you with this provocative thought to mull over. If the goal, based on everything we've discussed, is maximizing your sleep pressure for tonight's rest and keeping your biological clock perfectly in sync with your environment, what concrete step, what specific behavior that you currently do based on the material we covered today should you absolutely stop doing starting tomorrow morning? Stop doing. Maybe it's hitting that snooze button 3 times, letting yourself drift in and out of light sleep and confusing your clock. Maybe it's refusing to open the blinds right away to get that crucial morning light exposure. Maybe it's forcing yourself into bed way too early out of anxiety. Identify that one concrete counterproductive action that you know weakens your internal clock or bleeds off sleep pressure, and just remove it. Stop doing it and start to feel the potential power of true biological synchronization returning to your sleep.